You know, in the church, we don't often speak on the subject of wisdom. We emphasize doctrine a great deal, or understanding, or the law of God, or love, or patience, or forgiveness, any number of other topics, but don't really concentrate as much on just the subject of wisdom. Wisdom and knowledge both are recurring themes in the Bible. They're related, but they're not synonymous, wisdom and knowledge. One can be knowledgeable and not be very wise, but you really can't be the other way around. You might say knowledge is knowing how to drive a car, or maybe even the laws that are required. You know how to drive a car, but wisdom is knowing when it might not be safe to drive, or when it's time to slow down. How to be a good driver sometimes takes a lot of wisdom, not just knowledge of the vehicle itself. Wisdom guides us through life's choices, the vital element of life. It guides us through our choices in life. How do you know what to do? Everything's not spelled out. Fundamental right and wrong might be, but you need a lot of wisdom in life in making choices. Now, kids seem to know what wisdom is, children. Patrick, age 10, said, "Never trust a dog to watch your food." Michael, age 14, when your dad is mad and asks you, "Do I look stupid?" Don't answer. John, age 13, never tell your mom her diet's not working. Very unwise. Kids know that. Akoyo, age 9, said, never hold a dust buster and a cat at the same time. See, he's a smart kid. And finally, Naomi, pretty bright, wise child, if you want a kitten, start out asking for a pony. You work your way down, you probably end up with something that way. Well, we have a great deal of knowledge today in our world, our society. Where's the wisdom? Where is the wisdom that you see emanating from the schools, from government, many sources, the celebrity world? Where's the wisdom? Knowledge has increased, and wisdom seems to have gone south in many respects. Look at Isaiah 59 and verse 9. Well-known verse here, Isaiah 59, verse 9. Therefore, judgment is far from us. The wisdom it takes to make sound judgments, it's gone. Judgment's far from us. Neither does justice overtake us. We wait for light and behold obscurity, for brightness, but we walk in darkness. We grope for the wall like the blind. I know you see the same thing I do from time to time on the news or whatever. What are they thinking? You say to yourself. We grope for the wall like the blind. We grope as if we had no eyes. We stumble at noonday as though it was the middle of the night. Not sure what to do. Where's the wisdom and the judgment? So we're going to take a look very briefly today in the first split sermon at wisdom. We all need to make wise choices. Young people especially must use wisdom to navigate through school, their friendships, various circumstances growing up. Having wisdom is a great advantage for anybody in their life, young or old, especially young. What gets in the way of our wise choices? What prevents us or gets in the way? We'll see that in a few moments. Now, you'll recall in 1 Kings chapter 3, the book of 1 Kings chapter 3, how Solomon was going to be made the king, and God said, I'll give you whatever you wish. And what did he ask for? He asked for wisdom and discernment. God was very pleased with that. How am I going to know what to do? How am I going to make wise choices in ruling your people? Give me wisdom and discernment. Things are not always clear. What do we do? What's the right decision? In chapter 4, we won't go into that entire account and read that. You know that God gave him the wisdom, as it says here in 1 Kings chapter 4 and verse 30. Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the east country and all the wisdom of Egypt. He just seemed to know what to do, how to handle the situation. Of course, you know the account a little later of the two women that came, both claimed it was their child, and his wisdom was able to create a circumstance that it became obvious whose child it was. How did he come up with this? He just seemed to know what to do. So the book of Proverbs that Solomon wrote provides wisdom for a successful life. Very worthwhile study, especially for young people. But let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 1, beginning in verse 16. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 16. Ecclesiastes 1:16, Solomon is writing and said, I commune with my heart, or I thought to myself, or said to myself in my own heart. He said, well, look, I've come to great estate. I've gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. I really have a grasp of a great many subjects and how they relate to each other and when to use what at what time. Yes, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. I gave my heart to know wisdom, to know madness and folly and the distinction between the two. And I perceive that this also is vexation of spirit, for in much wisdom is much grief. What? For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increases knowledge increases sorrow. Well, why would he say that? Why would he end up asking God for wisdom, and God grants him wisdom, and people from around the world say, this is the wisest man I've ever run into? And then he writes and said, this wisdom is a lot of grief, a lot of vanity. Increasing in knowledge is sorrow. You know why Solomon would make that statement? Why would he say that? Sort of like this, the wise man once said, a wise man asks, how wise is it to pursue wisdom? Think about that one. How wise is it to spend time pursuing wisdom? Should you? Or is it like Solomon said, it ends up being a lot of grief? Job chapter 12, verse 12. This is true with most people, although not all. Job 12, verse 12, I'll read it to you. It says, with the ancient is wisdom, and in length of days is understanding. They're just often is no substitute for experience. As you get older, you look back and you're able to kind of assess and evaluate and grasp the experience of life, and you seem to have much more wisdom than you did when you were in your 20s or 30s, looking at it from that life from that perspective. So with the ancient is wisdom, and most people gain a certain amount of wisdom as they get older. They've learned a lot of things. You learn through experience. Sometimes you might mellow to a degree. If you were too uptight about things, maybe you were too exacting of your children when you were a young parent and making sure there was perfection and everything the child did, and too exacting, and you got a little older and you kind of mellowed out a little bit and weren't so uptight about everything. Or it can be the other way around. maybe you were too trusting of people. Now, everybody's good. Everybody's motive's good. Everybody's going to try to be fair about this, and you kind of learn a little wisdom. Well, everybody is not that way. Or maybe you were too suspicious of everything, and you learn you didn't have to be suspicious of everybody all the time in every situation. But in other words, you learn, you mellow, you change, and you kind of balance out. You grow in wisdom. Sometimes we wonder if our politicians learn anything from the past. I know we're frustrated at times looking on the news. Their primary goal, of course, is for the benefit of the party and to be reelected. And the judgments and the voting is not always according to what's the wisest thing for the country. But it goes along certain ideologies or other motives. You would think if you remove shoplifting from being a crime, what are you going to get more of? Chances are you'll get more shoplifting, not less. Well, in classical literature, the wise are typically very old, very calm, very intelligent. We're going to go seek wisdom from the wise man. He's an older man. He seemed to be very calm, very smart. The story is told of a new bank president who met with his predecessor and said, "I'd like to know what has been the key to your success." Well, the older gentleman looked at him and replied, "Young man, I can sum it up in 2 words. Good decisions. That's the key to my success." And he said, "Well, okay, I appreciate that. Thank you immensely for your advice, sir, but how does one come to know what are good decisions?" That's the question. "1 word, young man," replied the sage, "experience. I learned to make good decisions through experience." He said, "Well, that's well and good," said the younger man, and said, "Well, how does one get experience?" 2 words, said the elder, "bad decisions." That's how I learned to finally make good ones. Experience. Now look at Luke chapter 2, verse 52. Luke 2:52. It says here that Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with man and God. He increased in wisdom. I'm sure at age 12, after the incident of his parents coming back for him saying, "I'm about my father's business," them saying, "We were worried about you," says he went back with his parents and was subject to them. I'm sure he learned some things about where he was, the timing of his ministry, the role of his parents, how they experienced to him not being there, and he grew in wisdom through experience. He didn't sin, but he grew in wisdom. There's no way Jesus at age 12 was going to have the same amount of wisdom he did at age 30. Just couldn't. As knowledgeable as he was of the truth and of the Scriptures, he just grew in wisdom about life. We saw a lot of that, or see a lot of that in the Gospels. Remember the woman taken in adultery? Okay, which one of you is without sin? Go ahead and throw the first stone. Or they showed him a coin, and should we pay taxes to Caesar? Well, whose picture is that? Whose image on the coin? Well, it's Caesar's. Well, give Caesar what belongs to him. Give to God what belongs to him. Or they tried to trick her. Well, where do you get your authority? All right, I'll tell you. You first tell me. Now, the baptism of John, was that of God, or was that just John doing his own work? We're not going to answer that question, okay? And I won't answer. Had a great deal of wisdom at age 30. Didn't have it at age 12 to the same degree. So from where did all that wisdom come? Well, let's go to Proverbs chapter 8. Proverbs chapter 8. We've not read this, I know I haven't, at least to the congregation, for years and years. Proverbs chapter 8, we'll begin in verse 1 through 4. Does not wisdom cry? Understanding put forth her voice, wisdom crying out, hello, everybody, here I am. I'm there for the taking. I'm here to be of benefit to you. She stands in the top of the high places by the way in the places of the paths. She cries at the gates, at the entry of the city, at the coming in of the doors. Unto you, O men, I call, and my voice is to the sons of men. Hello, here I am. Seek me. Somebody ask about me. Nobody seems to want that. Wisdom calls out. Why don't we receive it? Why don't we want wisdom? Why isn't it natural? Because we know better, or we don't want the source of the wisdom. We want our kind of wisdom. In verse 14 of the same chapter, counsel is mine, and sound wisdom I am understanding. I have strength. By me kings reign, and princes decree justice. By me princes rule, and nobles, even all the judges of the earth. They're successful by using wisdom. I love them that love me, and those that seek me early shall find me. They're not successful by just their armies, if they make stupid decisions. Riches and honor are with me, as durable riches and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, than fine gold. My revenue than choice silver. I lead in the way of righteousness in the midst of the paths of judgment. And I cause those that love me to inherit substance, and I will fill their treasures. The Lord possessed me in the beginning of his way, before his works of old. God possessed me. This wisdom personified. God used me in the beginning. Well, if it's good enough for God, why isn't it good enough for us? Why don't we seek it? Why don't we have it? So on what is your life based? What guides your decision? What gives you the wisdom you have? Well, I just look what everybody else is doing and go along with that. You're going to make thousands of decisions from the time you're a young person until you die, making decisions. Thousands of them. They can be very serious or very minor. Well, God's way is the foundation of having sound judgment. Psalm 111. Psalm 111, verse 10. The fear of the Lord is where you start to gain some wisdom. You begin to fear God, which means you're putting God and his way as the guide of your life. Well, now you're getting yourself straightened out. Now you're getting on good footing for yourself. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Good understanding have all they that do his commandments. Now you have an orientation, a foundation, a way of judging whether something's good or bad. Values, principles. I'll read Proverbs 27, verse 12 to you. It says, a prudent man foresees the evil and hides himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. A prudent man, a wise man, somebody that knows how to judge what is evil and what isn't, and when he sees the evil or the potential for evil, well, I don't think we'll go there. I don't think that's a good idea for me to be there. And the others just wander on in blithely, and next thing you know, there's trouble. That's the way of God. So if you have the fear of the Lord and some humility, you're halfway there to being wise. You're way ahead of the rest. Way ahead. Just if you decide, I think God's way is the better way to live. I'm going to let that guide me. That's the beginning of wisdom. Doesn't mean you won't make some wrong decisions by any means or have all wisdom, but you're way ahead of the rest. Daniel 12:10 says, "Many shall be purified and made white and tried. But the wicked shall do wickedly. None of the wicked shall understand, but the wise will understand." They'll see what's going on, what spirit is driving this, where this is headed. They'll understand. In 1 Corinthians 2:7, Paul is writing to the church, 1 Corinthians 2:7, "But we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery." The wisdom of God. It's kind of mysterious to the world. Even the hidden wisdom which God ordained before the world unto our glory. Hidden wisdom. What's life about? What pays off in the end? What are you glad about when your life is over? Or what do you regret? What's going to tell you? The world's pursuing its own answers to that. Here's some quick tips, making wise decisions. How to make wise or wiser decisions. Obviously, point number one, think through the pros and the cons. Maybe write them down on one side of the paper and on the other. In other words, no rash decisions. You don't come to wise decisions making, snap judgments or rash decisions. However, once you make one, then go with it. That's what you decided to do. Okay, we're going with this, then go with it. But take the time to do that. Now, one person wrote, I don't have who wrote this, I found it recently, and here's what the person wrote. "A glut of information can be a kind of catch-22. While it adds to our knowledge, all this information we have available, it can be a block to our wisdom. We can be so busy trying to process more and more information that we don't have the time for quiet contemplation that is essential for the development of wisdom. We're bombarded with stuff all the time. You hardly have time to digest it, to ponder it, to meditate about it. Without contemplation, we lose perspective and can lose our grounding. Without our bearings, we lose a sense of place. Confused, we are more easily swayed. Because we're bombarded all the time with everything. People used to just watch the evening news at 5:30 or 6:30, a half-hour program. Well, that's what happened in the world today. And now it's 24 hours a day, along with a whole lot of other stuff. So the first one is to don't make any rash decision. Think them through. Point number 2 would be to get counsel. Get some counsel, some advice, feedback from others. Proverbs 12:15, "The way of the fool is right in his own eyes. But if you hearken unto counsel, that's wise." Hey, what do you think about that? I'm thinking about doing this. How does that sound to you? Like the one person said, the trouble with good advice is that it usually interferes with your plans. That's not what I wanted to do. Not what I wanted to hear. I had my mind made up. I'm going through the motions of getting input. Get counsel. Point number 3, analyze your motive. What's your motive? We could turn to the account of Abraham and Lot. And Abraham, there was strife among their herdsmen and so on. And Abraham said, "Oh, you make the choice. You go to the east, I'll go to the west. You go this way, I'll go that way." And Lot looked around, and he just looked at what's the most fertile, what's the richest land. He didn't contemplate and say, "Well, wait, I don't want to go over there by Sodom and Gomorrah. I don't think that's a good environment. I don't want to go that direction. His motive was probably what's best for Lot financially, materially. So analyze your motive. It shouldn't always be wealth. What's best in the long run? The next point, watch your emotions. Watch your emotions. Ecclesiastes 7:9, be not hasty in spirit to be angry, for anger rests in the bosom of fools. So what's your emotions? What's going on inside right now? What's motivating this decision? That, from political standpoint, the founding fathers say, okay, we're going to have a House of Representatives, and that'll represent all the people. And naturally, human nature, they're going to get stirred up about things and quickly pass a law built on sentiment and on emotion. So we're going to have a Senate. And everything they decide to do is going to go to the Senate, and the Senate is going to keep kind of a governor on some of these rash decisions that people tend to make. Slow it down. It's the more deliberative body to check what emotions often do, even people making laws. So watch the emotions. Another factor, get the facts. Be careful with assumptions. Remember the account in the book of Joshua when Reuben, Gad, and half-tribe Manasseh on the east side of the Jordan set up an altar, and the other tribes thought they're setting up an altar for idolatry. They got all armed and they were ready to go, and they were heading out to punish those tribes. Until they finally, before disaster struck, they learned, no, we weren't doing it for any kind of idolatry and worshiping false God. This is a memorial for what God has done for us. Oh, okay. I'm glad you stopped us. I'm glad somebody said something. Be careful with assumptions. Get the facts. 2 more points. Associate with people who are making wise choices in life. Who are you hanging around with? Associate with people that make wise choices in life. Sometimes you can see people that are stumbling through, making a mess of things, and they're always the one passing on advice, like they know everything. Proverbs 13:20, he that walks with wise men will be wise. You tend to go along with them, you learn from them. You want your life like theirs or like somebody else's? He that walks with the wise man shall be wise, but the companion of fools will be destroyed. Obviously, then, the last point, which could be the first actually and important, ask for God's guidance. Ask for God's guidance. Not going to make it obvious, every choice, every decision we have to make, but nonetheless, He promises to be there for us. So we can have all these other tips, which are good. We want to ask for God's guidance and His help. Proverbs 3, verse 5. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him. He'll direct your paths. Won't always be obvious. You don't always know when you make a decision whether this is going to be the best one or not. You're doing the best you can. But you're going to pray and ask for God's guidance. And in the end, in the long run, you'll be grateful that you did, and we'll thank Him for all His guidance. Let's read 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 19. 1 Corinthians 1:19. We asked the question earlier, why did Solomon write about wisdom and then said, the more wisdom you get, the more grief you have? Why would he say such a thing? 1 Corinthians 1, verse 19, for it's written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and will bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent of this world. Well, where are all these so-called wise people? Where's the scribe, the disputer of this world? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? Yeah, there is a wisdom of the world. People can be very astute, very crafty, very clever. They know how to get ahead. They know how to play the game. They know how to work the system. They can get ahead that way. Very shrewd. But unless you have the wisdom that brings in the purpose of life in God's way, it's a waste of time or temporary. That's what Solomon meant. I was gaining all this wisdom about life, and I wonder if it was for people to come and visit, and they were in awe about everything I knew and everything I understood, and what good is all that? Of and by itself, that's nice. But if it's not something that lends itself towards eternal life, spiritual principles, lasting value, that's a lot of grief. Just learning stuff. Okay, I got ahead of everybody else. Then what? So that's the context he was putting that in. Unless it has to do with the purpose of life and in harmony with God and His way, well, then it's worldly wisdom. Might help physically, but then it's over. Let's go to one final verse, a few verses actually in James chapter 3. James 3. Verse 18. I've got the wrong chapter. Well, verse 18 of chapter 3, the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace in them that make peace. I've written down the wrong chapter, I believe. And I can't find it. And it was a comment about wisdom itself. And I can't find it. Do you know which it is? 17. Verse 17? James 3? Well, yes, I had more verses there than that's why I thought it was wrong. Well, that's certainly maybe what I had in mind. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Well, that was the point I'm sure I wanted to make, was the wisdom that comes from above, not worldly wisdom. Solomon was in pursuit of worldly wisdom, and he gained a great deal of it. It wasn't all wrong, but that's what it was. He gained a lot of worldly wisdom. A lot of people have that. But he said it takes you down a dead-end street. Yeah, I got ahead. Yeah, I knew how to do that. I knew how to do the market, or I knew how to achieve something else. Hear the conclusion of the matter, he said, in Ecclesiastes. Walk with God and in His way. That's the conclusion. There's the wisdom. All this wisdom we talk about. Walking with God and His ways. This world is losing its common sense. Even common sense. It's just, what's going on? Why are we can't we see that that's ridiculous? Not going to pay off? We can't. Sounds good, feels good. It's losing its common sense. Trading it for lofty sounding philosophies, popular sentiment, false values, good feelings, all the things that are taking place not only just in the adult society, but in the schools and all over. So Proverbs says wisdom was with God in the beginning. God possessed me in the beginning, the wisdom that God had. Wisdom was with God in the beginning because God is wisdom, because His way is wisdom. Makes sense of things, gives life purpose. So don't trade the wisdom of God for the popular wisdom of this world.